This week I challenged myself to create a calendar for the rest of the year. I created calendars that are unique to every month. I've only achieved a few months, so unfortunately this video is going to be quite short. The first month I did was February. This is using my standard template that I designed. It's very formal and functional. It allows lots of space to write what is happening in each week, despite that nothing's happening at the moment. And I've clearly spaced out the weeks with the weekends in a different colour. This is incredibly useful, I found, because it allows you to quickly scan down the calendar to see when the weekends are and break up the monotonous of the lines. This makes it easier to break the weeks up and clearly see where one week stops and the next week starts. For March, I tried to go to modern looking design. I've used rounded boxes to signify each of the days and two large boxes to signify the weekend. I made the weekend boxes larger because you often have more things to write in those days. For the colour scheme, I decided on a collection of greens. March is usually quite a green month, so I thought that they would look right, but I'm not entirely sure I like the colour scheme. For April, I went for a very retro look. It looks like it came out of the 80s. I wasn't alive in the 80s, so it looks like it came out of what I thought the 80s looked like. I use a classic pink and blue colour scheme. I've split up the days so each box represents 2 days, one in the top side and the other in the bottom side. This allows you to get more days on the same amount of boxes. To signify the weekends, I've made them blue. This doesn't allow the same scanning as the February version, where you can easily see where the weekends are, but it allows it to be a bit more interesting. For May, I stepped away from making standard calendars for organisation and moved towards more interesting calendars. I created a moon phase calendar for May using the data for the lunar calendar. I created 2 versions of this calendar. One version has the moons already coloured in, the other version the moons are empty. This could allow people to colour in the moons at a later date after they printed out the calendar. I like the black and grey design, and it's very monotone, but it does lack functionality. It is useful to seeing what the phase of the moon is, but less useful for writing what you're going to do that week on. Finally, as I didn't get very far this week, the last calendar I made was for June. And for June I did a tidal calendar. Each day shows the high tide at Dover Port. This was the only tide times I could find that were forecast that far into the future. It creates a lovely wave effect as high tide moves every day a bit later. This created a stepped up effect between each day. When it got too late, about 7 o'clock, I moved it back to the previous high tide, which would be about 7 in the morning. To create these calendars, I used Affinity Designer on an iPad Pro. This allowed me to draw with a lot more ease than a mouse, but it also had the downside of having the rigid lines of a calendar in a geometric format, which I've used extensively in this project, was slightly more tricky with the pen than with a mouse. Affinity Designer and the other Affinity products are currently on a free trial. They've generously given people a 90-day free trial to help out because everyone's stuck at home. I've enjoyed using the software. It's very much like Illustrator from Adobe, but only has a one-time cost. In my opinion, it's a much better priced option.